Welcome to a Friday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside my man from CBSSports.com. Brad Botkin is here. What's up, Brad?
What's up, man? Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. You are at your in-laws. Is that what's happening?
I am. I'm in Paso Robles, California. I am in my father-in-law's sort of makeshift studio, but it's pretty cool down here. A lot of Yankee gear.
Okay.
And a weird thing that we went through last night that I got to talk about. So have you guys seen the Bob Dylan movie yet?
No.
Okay, I'm assuming you know Bob Dylan.
I'm
going to make
aware
that
of his existence.
Okay. I got a question for you, producer Aaron. I need you to answer in the chat. Do either of you guys know who Woody Guthrie is?
I'm aware of Woody Guthrie.
Okay. Can you name the song? The big song?
No, I'm terrible at song names, even with bands and groups that I like.
Proving my point, Aaron.
Where are we going with this?
Okay. So he plays a big part. I guess this land is made for you and me.
Sure.
Part in the Bob Dylan movie, and I was like, "Who's Woody Guthrie?" And my in-laws were giving me hell because I don't know this guy. So I was asking some strangers on the street, and the two people I asked last night, they said everybody knows Woody Guthrie. I said, no, everybody does not know Woody Guthrie. You half know who he is. Aaron's claiming he does, so it sort of backfired on me. I thought I was going to get two more people who were oblivious to
You just were asking randos on the street?
Well, just some people in line at dinner, and if I had it my way, I would have taken a poll. But my in-laws were embarrassed.
Well, I guess you're kind of doing that now. This is the kind of really thorough research you can expect from Brad Botkin on Beyond the Arc. You and I got to do more shows together. This is good times. All right, later in the show, we're going to do Jimmy Butler versus Pat Riley. We're going to do LeBron versus the NFL. Brad's bold predictions, I assume, will have something to do with Woody Guthrie. And then we'll do our team of the night at the very end. A lot of possibilities for that one. But first, we're going to start with Luka. News broke that he had an MRI on Thursday and he will be reevaluated in 1 month for a left calf strain. Previously, he had a left heel contusion. He left the Christmas Day game against the Wolves on crutches, Brad. This is going to end his streak of 5 straight first-team All-NBA selections because he won't be eligible for awards now. Big picture here, not great for the Mavs.
It's certainly not. Kyrie Irving's having another incredible season, but he's now going to have to be the 1A guy. As we know, Kyrie Irving has been his best when he's all there off the court. He's been at his best when he's been able to be the wingman of LeBron James. We saw it for a little bit with Kevin Durant, and he's been superb with Luka Doncic. Now, when he has to step into the 1A role, now kudos to the Mavs and Nico Harrison and how they've built out that roster. They've built it out to potentially survive defensively. They've built it out to potentially survive with spray and shoot with Kyrie handling the ball. I think they can withstand this. I don't think it's going to be the knee-jerk reaction that the Mavs fall off of a cliff, but this is certainly a team to watch now because of how tightly packed the Western Conference is. You're talking about, I think, 2 games between the play-in line and where the Mavs are right now at 3 games between the Mavs and the lottery line. So you don't have to drop very far. And it can happen quickly. So certainly something to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this. I think you're right. The knee-jerk reaction could be that the wheels come off of this thing. They're 19-11 as we record this. They're 4th in the Western Conference. But as you said, it's so bunched up there. Yeah. They're 2 games away from being in the play-in. And what? Yeah.
3 from the lottery.
Yeah. So it's tough. They're 4th in offensive rating. They've been really good with both of those guys out there, Luka and Kyrie. They're just hovering around just outside the top 10 in defense. So not quite as good as they were after the trade deadline last year when they added PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. But I do like the team. The problem with the construction of the roster, to the extent that there's a problem, is it's very much built around the idea of having both of those guys out there because they've got some really great role players. The players that they put around Kyrie and Luka are fantastic. I love Gafford. I love Lively. PJ Washington's been really good for them. Klay Thompson in a diminished Klay Thompson role, not the Klay Thompson that we saw in Golden State, but still a valuable, useful player. All these guys are good pieces. I don't know that any of them can buoy this team. I think it really is going to come down to what kind of Kyrie are you going to get? Like, is he going to go supernova or not?
Well, that's what's going to be fun because he's been incredible. He was incredible down the stretch of the Christmas Day game when Luka went out. sort of an unspoken thing. His presence is obviously 90% of his value on some nights, sort of like a Steph Curry, even if he has 7 points. So I'm not diminishing that. But Luka Doncic has been having a very down shooting season of late. He's come around. Kyrie Irving has been fantastic. And so I think you're right. He's going to have to carry the load. He's going to be a nightly must watch because of what he's going to have to do. But depth gets you through these things. And I think their upper echelon depth, their 5-6 guys that they can go to. I looked at their schedule. There's a couple of tough games, but they've got some Portlands and some Utahs in there. The thing about this injury, with this calf injury with Luka Doncic, and this started way back with Kevin Durant, when it started as a calf strain, and everyone was like this innocuous wording, it's a strain. And then, I talked to a lot of orthopedic surgeons around that time, and what's going on? Why is Durant not coming back? They're calling it a strain, and a strain is basically a tear, and you start to learn how connected it is to the Achilles tendon and the stability of the whole region. And ever since then, if you watch these calf strains or these calf injuries, people are really, really conservative with the timetable of them coming back, because we've seen that it can lead to Achilles issues. And so that's something they say, what now? Reevaluation in a month. You don't screw around with Luka Doncic. So if this thing stretches to 5 weeks, 6 weeks, we really now have to start talking about the Mavs.
Yeah, the KD situation was in 2019 when he was out with a calf strain, and he ended up coming back in the finals and then blowing out his Achilles, and that changed the whole trajectory of his career and the Warriors. And then we saw it last year too with Giannis, who missed the playoffs. They decided to be really cautious with him. He had a calf strain. They didn't want something like that to happen. One more thing for you before we move on here, because it's going to be a tough stretch for the Mavs. I think, if they can weather it sort of the way that the Wolves weathered the Karl Anthony Towns being out last year and just stay in the mix, they could be okay. But it's a very difficult Western Conference. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about is how this impacts the MVP race, because I think pretty much universally everybody had 4 guys, and then we would just figure out the 5th. Well, Luka was one of those 4 guys, Joker and Giannis and SGA and Luka. Now no Luka. There's not going to be a Luka in the MVP conversation. Who do you think the next 2 guys are that enter the conversation?
I think Tatum can end up there. I think Donovan Mitchell can end up there.
Where are you on Cat?
Karl Anthony Towns, I was just going to say, we were hammering him for his defensive deficiencies early on, and some of his, his field goal defended against percentages were pretty bad. Their rim protection was pretty bad. But we talked about this last week with Bill. They've really kind of they've tightened up. Not to get too nerdy here, but Mikal Bridges was really not getting over screens very well. He was like, and that's something he's been excellent at in the like one of the best parts of his defensive profile. And he's trailing around these screens and he's lagging a little bit. And so they're getting downhill in that jail situation. And then Cat was dropping so far back, they had all this space to drop in these little 6-footers. And Cat has come up and Bridges has come down, and they've squeezed that. And since then, just that one part of their half-court defense, they have 2 good of perimeter defenders with Anunoby and Hart, and Bridges, and Cat can be better. We saw that he was better, albeit in a different role in Minnesota. So now that the defense of New York has come around with the offensive season that Towns is having,
it's ridiculous.
And the Knicks, let's say the Knicks end up in a 2 seed. Let's say they jump Boston. Yeah, I think you really got to talk about Karl Anthony Towns, but I still also think there's like a pretty clear line. There was 4 guys, but I think there was really 2 that I would say would really be in the lead for it, and I would say that was a 3. Giannis.
I was going to say, are you going to take out Giannis or take out SGA? And like either of those guys should be in the combo.
No, they should. And I guess Jokic sort of disproved this a while back. I guess Westbrook did too, that you don't have to be on a top seed team. But historically speaking, you do. So recently we've seen a couple of examples, but if you look back through the years of the MVPs, they're always a 1 or a 2 seed. And so Giannis was going to be tough for him. I think that was going to be tough for Luka. I think in the end it's going to end up being Jokic or SGA. Jokic, I don't think will be in a top 2 seed, but he's just been so spectacular. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, I know people hate the analytical talk with the on-off numbers, and they're getting tired of it with Nikola Jokic. But Jesus, I mean, look what happens to
yeah,
the
his
Nuggets.
numbers are
It's
undeniable. They're
insane.
ridiculous. For
It's
me, I
insane.
think it's a pretty clear delineation of Joker, then SGA, then Giannis, and then that's why I was bringing up. I thought Luka was right after that, and
I agree.
now I would probably go Tatum and Cat in the 4 and the 5 spot.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And it's interesting. We say like they're in the conversation, but are they really? Like we always say the top 5 is the conversation, but could they really win? So the one guy I would say, Jason Tatum cannot win that. They have too much star power to spread out the opinions of that team. It happened with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant when they were on the same team. I just don't think Jason Tatum can win. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But we'll keep an eye on all of this as Luka is reevaluated in 1 month. Want to move on to the Jimmy Butler versus Pat Riley situation, which is just really, I can't tell you how much I love this. So on Christmas Day, because of course it was on Christmas Day, we got a report from Shams saying that the 6-time All-Star prefers a trade out of Miami ahead of the February 6th deadline, which is just really beautiful. And then yesterday, out of nowhere, I got a call from work and they're like, can you hop on HQ real quick to talk about the Pat Riley statement? And I was like, what Pat Riley statement? What a gem this is from the Miami Heat on behalf of Pat Riley. Here's the full statement. We usually don't comment on rumors, but all the speculation has become a distraction to the team and is not fair to the players and the coaches. Therefore, we will make it clear we are not trading Jimmy Butler. Oh boy. So not surprisingly, Jimmy Butler did not play last night, but this whole thing has really come to a head. You now have a situation, and I mentioned this on social media yesterday. You have yet another instance in the NBA of a big high profile NBA basketball executive publicly and very messily warring with his star player in a game of chicken. And somehow it doesn't involve the Sixers. This is excellent.
Yeah. So this is the part of the NBA ratings talk that everybody always doesn't talk about. So the half of the NBA that everybody cares about is the Real Housewives aspect of it. It's all the drama of who's warring with who and who's resigning with what agency. We're going to talk about this later with the Kings, who wants out, who wants in, who's going to be traded, who's got the parts. And so this is the part of the NBA that always has our attention. Whatever that says about us, I don't know. But yeah, Pat Riley coming out now. Usually when somebody comes out like this, it's a matter of leverage. We're not trading him, i.e. throw us your absolute very best offers. We're not gonna let this go for nothing. But the Heat have been the one team that have been as stubborn as Danny Ainge and or the Warriors in terms of hanging on. You know, we saw this with the Raptors when they refused to get rid of Anunoby and Lowry and all these guys they wanted to hang on to when they had trade value. We watched the Bulls do it with Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan. Are the Heat really going to hang on to Jimmy Butler when he has pretty clearly made it that he's going to turn down his player option? He's going to walk. Now, got to look at the teams that actually have the cap space to hold the Heat to the fire and be able to sign him as a free agent.
It's like the Nets and nobody else, which is a problem here.
Story. There's always these guys that are saying, I'm going to leave, I'm going to be a free agent, but you've got to look at the teams that have the war chest in terms of salary to pay them. So this is going to be interesting to watch. I do not think, in my opinion, Jimmy Butler is like absolutely clearly definitively untradeable, but Pat Riley is certainly getting out in front of this in terms of throw me your best offer.
Well, these two guys just staring each other down on this situation. It's bad both ways. It's bad all the way around. I think that they're both kind of like acting out of spite here rather than what's in their best interest. I know that the Heat have told Bill and have positioned themselves as, hey, look, you know, in a weakened depleted Eastern Conference, if we have Jimmy Butler on the floor where he's played 20 of 27 games, I believe 28 games, we can beat anybody. And they are in the 6th seed. So they're in the playoffs proper as we record this. And the teams ahead of them, I'm not scared by the Magic because they're so injury riddled. The Bucks, depending on if you've got Dame and Giannis out there, and then you've got the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Cavs ahead of them. I'm not sure that I quite buy into what they're saying that, you know, they could make a run in the Eastern Conference this year, but having Jimmy Butler is, this is a point I've made on this show many times. Jimmy Butler is more valuable to the Heat than he probably is to anybody else at 35 years old and with like a really onerous contract. We're going to talk about that. We're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side, I want to get into some of the teams that Jimmy has been linked to, because one of them, Shams doubled down on the Suns, and we already saw what happened with Jimmy Butler's agent saying, no, this isn't the case. So we're going to go through these teams and how likely it would possibly be that he could end up with somebody else if, in fact, Pat Riley goes back on his word and ends up moving him. It's a delightful mess. You're watching Beyond the Arc.
At CBS Sports Galazzo Network, we're bringing you the game.
Madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, you can get us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Please download, subscribe, leave a review. And on Spotify, if you're listening to us there, look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode. You can leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the show. All right, the teams that he has been linked to, the Suns and Golden State, apparently, according to Shams, are at the top of his list. He's making $48.8 this year. He has a player option for $52.4 next year. It's hard for me to imagine, as you mentioned, him getting anywhere close to that money if he opts out. Maybe he hates Pat Riley so much that he does that. I don't know. But if he does somehow end up getting moved, let's start with the Warriors here. Your Warriors could very much use somebody like Jimmy Butler because Steph needs help.
Oh, yeah, he certainly does need help if you want to contend. I still think the Warriors will right this ship to their ceiling and end up fighting for a top 6 seed. But they cannot win a title with this. Okay, you can't stack up 7 guys and think that they equal a 1 guy, and they need a second 1 guy. Dennis Schroeder is not that, and Jonathan Kuminga is not. I don't think is ever going to be that, but is certainly not going to be that this year. So it comes down to, again, this war of timelines with the Warriors that we've been hearing about ever since they drafted James Wiseman, and their refusal to trade Wiseman when he had trade value, their refusal to trade Jordan Poole when he had trade value. They still have refused to trade Podziemski, Moody, and Kuminga. And they've held firm to this, and they've got that 2022 championship as evidence that it worked. When it really didn't, Jordan Poole contributed to that, but that was really the old guys winning that championship. I would make the deal if I were them. I think Steph Curry is still a top 10 player, but we are seeing evidence that he certainly cannot absolutely carry an inferior contending team anymore to anything more than a play-in, I think, or a low top 6 seed. So it just comes down to, if you want to maximize this, me as a Warriors fan, I'm begging for it to happen. I do not want to end the Steph Curry era losing to whoever, the Rock, or not it's not going to be the Rockets. I don't know, the Lakers in the play-in game. I want to see them compete. I think they can compete. I think they have the defensive chops. I think they have the supporting shooting, and I think they have the package to get it done. So, I mean, to me, if the Heat, because Pat Riley's going to do this for business. I mean, the guy let Dwayne Wade go. So the business is going to take precedent if somebody can make him knock, and the Warriors can get pretty close. I mean, Kuminga is good. He's I think about as good of a young piece as you're going to find being offered. They can offer draft picks that the Suns really can't.
They've got all their first round picks except for the 2030 top 20 protected that goes to the Wiz. They are hard capped at the first apron though, so they can't take back more money than they send out. So for salary matching purposes, they'd probably have to include Wiggins or Draymond. It's not going to be Draymond. So Wiggins and Wiggins. Right. So it would be Wiggins and Kuminga and, some sort of pick situation. I would do that.
You make the money work. But from that side, if you're the Heat and you're going to get a guy that, even if he stays, if you're honest with yourself. Now this is what parity does, is it can sort of delude you into thinking that you have a chance, when there's no superpower, even though Boston is a super team. It can say, hell, we can make a run, whereas like if the old Durant Curry Warriors were there, you wouldn't even be able to delude yourself. So, but even that still, the Heat are not making a run. They're maybe a top 6 team because the East is so weak around that area, but they can't think that they can compete for a title. And so if they're smart about it, I think that Warriors package, if Dunleavy was willing to put it on the table, you can really set yourself up around Hero, who's having an incredible season, and Bam Adebayo with Jonathan Kuminga and some future draft capital. You've got now the makings of something that you can keep contending.
I think like this war of the wills with Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler has to work itself out somehow, because clearly this situation is not tenable. The question is how much, what's Pat Riley's pain tolerance? is he willing to take this into the offseason and force Jimmy Butler's hand and maybe do some sort of sign and trade situation? Producer Aaron wants to know, and by the way, we thank everybody for commenting. We've got some thoughts here from people on YouTube to trade Moody, Pods, and Looney.
Okay. Pods might be getting traded to the G League. I mean, let's
yeah,
we need a whole show on my man Pods. I mean, we couldn't get Lauri Markkanen for Pods. I mean, this guy, I'm not even sure he should be on the big club.
He took a little bit of a step back for sure. Producer Aaron brings up an intriguing question here. At 35 years old, are we certain that Jimmy Butler is more valuable than Wiggins? I think so.
Well, okay. So you're really tugging at my heartstrings here because I love Andrew Wiggins and he's playing fantastic this season. He's back to 2022 Andrew Wiggins, but that was when that's all the Warriors needed him to be. So the Warriors, if they were going to win as currently constructed right now, they would need Andrew Wiggins to be what Jimmy Butler can be in the playoffs, and he can't be that. So he's gotten back to his 22 form, 17, 18 points, very efficient from three, playing defense again, but that's not going to be enough. Okay, they're not as good as they were in 22. Jimmy Butler's the guy that can get you buckets. That system, it still is always
Jimmy buckets.
It's always going to work. That system in Golden State is always going to work to a degree because of Steph Curry's movement and the paranoia that it creates, to a degree. But teams are pretty hip to that when that's the only place you can go for consistent offense. You switch off ball. There are stretches of games where Steph Curry doesn't even touch the ball for like 3 minutes. Kerr doesn't run a lot of pick and roll to get him the ball at the top. So a guy like Jimmy Butler, outside of the system, independent of everything being created for you, that can go, to your point, get buckets, is an invaluable resource. That's why he's been so good in the playoffs, and the Warriors need it. Wiggins can do it at a 6. Butler can do it at a 9.
It would be interesting. Here's the other component, and then let's move on from the Warriors. The personalities, right? Because, and this is usually Bill's bailiwick, but I'll run it past you. Jimmy Butler is like an acquired taste. You already have one of those in Draymond Green. Now, Steve Kerr has been dealing with Draymond and his personality for a long time, but I had a conversation with Steve Kerr a few years ago and wrote a whole story about like coaches in the NBA. And his whole thing was that they should be called managers, kind of like in soccer, because 90% of the gig is managing personalities. How do you think that adding Jimmy Butler onto that roster would work out when, again, like Jimmy he's Jimmy for all his positives and negatives. You're going to get what you're going to get.
Yeah. Listen, I think Jimmy, it's easy to be Jimmy when you're rolling up on Minnesota Wiggins and Minnesota Towns. And since he's come to Miami, he's a competitive guy, but that same as Draymond. So there's been some dust ups. The other thing was Spoelstra, but by and large, it's been an incredibly successful marriage. There's no chance Jimmy Butler, hypothetically, rolls into Golden State and just starts making waves with Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and that. Or there's just no chance. He's not going to come in and start playing with the third team guys in practice and say, it's just not going to happen. There's too much stability in the organization. There's too much respect for Steph at the top of it. That is, to me, a storyline that should not even be talked about. If the Warriors, let's put this on the table. Pat Riley concedes. Jimmy Butler going out to Golden State. Kuminga's coming back with draft picks. Both teams are happy, and the Warriors like, you know what? Jimmy's kind of an ass. I don't think we can deal with it in the locker room. Give me a break. Non-story. Jimmy Butler. Can we please get him to Golden State? If I haven't been clear about that, can we please?
It would be a very interesting addition to a team that could definitely use a Jimmy Butler. Another team that's on the list here has been mentioned is the Mavs. This is a much more difficult one to pull off. They owe a 2027 top 2 protected to the Hornets. The 2029 goes to the Nets. They don't control either 2028 or 2030, but they do have some pieces: Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, Jaden Hardy, Quentin Grimes. They got a whole bunch of guys that could be interesting. I think it just would be more difficult, but at a time where they're going to miss, as we just mentioned at the top of the show, Luka for the next month, all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, like if you could pull it off somehow, Jimmy, at least fit-wise, going to be a lot harder. They have to do a lot more gymnastics than the Warriors would have to do. But on paper, I like that fit.
Of course. And the way that they play in terms of sort of that methodical half-court style around Luka, everybody's used to playing that way, of the ball in the hands of one guy and spraying out the shooters. So, it would be an incredible fit. Again, it's not my specialty to figure out how they would come up with the pieces. I know this. Typically, when something needs to work, they find a way for it to work if you have the ammo in your gun. If they have the draft picks, they do have some young players. I think that would be interesting to the Heat, although I don't think anybody as interesting in Jonathan Kuminga. And if that ends up being the thing that tips the scale, because you look at a team like Denver could really use him too. Denver could really use him. Do they think that Michael Porter Jr. on that kind of a contract is a Jonathan Kuminga? Because if you need that one piece that's then supported by draft capital to be the fulcrum of your package, I think Jonathan Kuminga, from what I'm looking around and seeing or hearing, I think he's the best guy. But what fits? Yeah. I mean, Minnesota, if you could go back to Minnesota, could really use him. Denver, I think, is something to really watch. I think with the way that Jokic is playing and the instability of their bench and understanding that there's probably a ceiling, and they're sort of in that similar position with Curry. If you have a player that good with Curry and Golden State, it's very difficult to cash in. I mean, if they could swing a Jimmy Butler, and Michael Porter Jr. is a decent piece, the contract is pretty alarming. But I would watch Denver, if not for Butler, for something, because they're on the cusp of being a contender as well, but not quite there yet. So those are all interesting teams to me.
One more team that we'll go to here that was mentioned in the Shams report that is at the top of Jimmy Butler's wish list, supposedly along with the Warriors, is the Phoenix Suns. Now, you'll remember that the first time that these rumors percolated, that Jimmy Butler's agent basically called Shams a liar and said that this hasn't happened, that Jimmy isn't interested in going to the Suns, that we haven't had any conversations. Well, Shams doubled down and said that, nope, the Suns are at the top of Jimmy Butler's wish list. You can put the reporting aside for a second. We'll just talk about the actual team and the fit. The Suns are having a weird season. They obviously could use a guy like Jimmy Butler. They're in the same situation as the Golden State Warriors. They're 15-14. They're in the play-in right now. When KD came back, everybody just assumed that they'd go back to playing at the top of the Western Conference like they had been. That hasn't really been the case. The problem here is that this is one of the most complicated teams to get Jimmy Butler to. They are over the second apron. They can't take back more money than they send out. They can't aggregate salaries, crucially, which means in order to get Jimmy Butler, it would have to be either KD, that's not going to happen, Devin Booker, that's not going to happen, or Bradley Beal. The problem with Bradley Beal is that he still has a no trade clause. So he would have to waive that and say, okay, well, maybe I would be better off in Miami. I'm not sure why Miami would want Bradley Beal. I just don't see the Suns happening like at all.
I don't either. And I don't either. If the Sun or if the Heat wanted to talk themselves into it, they would simply have to be saying, because Bradley Beal is not a future piece. If anything, he's a long-term anchor around your cap situation. So if you're looking at Bradley Beal as the core of a package that's going back, then that means you think you can win right now with Bradley Beal. And all you're doing is downgrading from Jimmy Butler to Bradley Beal.
You're getting a worse player. And by the way, on top of all the things I just said, the Suns don't have any picks to ship out either. Exactly. I just don't see like Pat Riley, who just drew a big time line in the sand, deciding, no, we're going to take the line out of the sand for Brad Beal.
No,
not going to happen.
No way. No way.
Not going to happen. Also, the Rockets have been mentioned, but I don't know why the Rockets would blow up what's a really young, interesting team.
Oh my God! But the Rockets are interesting. The Rockets are interesting.
They've got, well, that would be the easiest one too, because they've got a million pieces and they've got multiple picks. Like if we're talking about who has the most to offer, it'd be the Rockets, full stop.
Yeah, you know what? And I regret not thinking about them. That's something to watch, because they do have some redundancy in terms of, I like Jalen Green. I think he's better than his shooting numbers indicate. They need somebody on that team that can shoot, and that's sort of
they need a closer is what they need, and Jimmy would be that guy.
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
I think that team is closer to contending than I think the general perception, because I think there's still some lingering, like, this is a rebuilding team. That's sort of still in the air around them. And it's actually a really good team. I think it's a team that's much closer to contending than that whole rebuild characterization would indicate. They're arguably the best defense in the league.
You've come to the right place. I am a big time Rockets acolyte. I sing the praise of the Rockets all the time on this show. Bill likes to laugh at me a little bit because they are offensively.
And has there been a more Ime player? I mean, than Jimmy Butler?
Butler and Ime would be a really good fit, but we'll keep an eye on that as Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler go to war. The NBA drama is the absolute best. On the other side, we're going to do a little bit more NBA drama, and we're going to discuss LeBron versus the NFL. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets.
The stuff of absolute dreams.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, you can find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe. If you click on the little bell symbol, you'll get notified when we go live. We are live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern. Come and join us. All right, LeBron versus the NFL. You rightly said there's been this whole discussion about everybody hand-wringing and pearl clutching about the NBA's ratings dipping. And Adam Silver was like, well, look, I mean, aside from the NFL, like sports across the board are basically ratings have dipped because not everybody is consuming it on traditional cable anymore. And also like our social media imprint is really significant and people are streaming and there's different ways to consume the NBA. But you rightly pointed out that the NBA is still the league leader, the worldwide leader in drama. We talk about stupid stuff that happens in the NBA all the time. One of the stupid things that happened, Christmas Day was awesome. So many good games happened. And after the Lakers beat your Warriors, LeBron, who's just got his finger on the pulse of this stuff, had some interesting things to say about who owns Christmas Day.
I love the NFL. I love the NFL, but Christmas is our day.
LeBron was basically just pointing out that, hey, Wemby in the Knicks game was great. Wolves and the Mavs was great, even though Luka went down. Sixers beat the Celtics in Boston. That was awesome. He just had beaten the Warriors. That was a fantastic game. He's just talking about, hey, look at our content. We've got good content. Not surprisingly, all the NFL stands came for LeBron here. But just, again, tremendous conversation.
Yeah, okay. So I'm with LeBron this year because they were fantastic games. Now come talk to me when we get some bogus, pseudo all-star game that's a 30-point spread and nobody's trying by the fourth quarter and it's a dull product. I don't know that you want to be going up.
Forget about the all-star game. I'm talking about this season. So we might be the wrong guys to ask about this because we watch basketball for a living. But I think that there have been a whole bunch of people who have been wringing their hands about the NBA shoots too many threes and the product isn't as entertaining. They're talking about the ratings. And I'm like, I don't know what you're watching. I'm watching really good competitive basketball. Last night, just a random Thursday in December, ton of games that ended up going into clutch time.
Yeah. John, you have to be cognizant of the differing lenses through which people watch basketball. It's such an aesthetic preference that we're so ingrained in the way we watch this thing, and we love the nuances. I've talked to a lot of people who, when they say, "Oh, we shoot too many threes," and everybody plays the same, they'll say, "Oh, no. This team creates their threes differently than this team." So it's like, no, listen, Johnny on Tuesday night is not paying attention to the fact that the Spurs, ran a Spain pick and roll and the Pacers pulled up in transition. It's a three-pointer to them. It's a bunch of and I do think we have to be cognizant of this uniformity and everything looking the same and it being a pseudo all-star game, pickup game, run down and either try to beat your guy one-on-one or shoot a three. I do think that is a factor. I don't completely downplay that. But in terms of the NFL and Christmas Day, I do think it's easier to say NBA still owns it when you have these awesome games. I said these pseudo all-star games, an NBA game can very easily turn into a pseudo all-star game because of the style that it's predicated upon from the start. It's already a get to the hole, shake your guy or shoot a three, which is what pickup basketball is. If the game gets out of hand and it's not close, it becomes an all-star game very quickly. They just do. And if you have 5 bad products, now to be fair, I didn't even know honestly, I didn't even know the NFL had games on Christmas. I looked up and I was like, so obviously right now the NBA, and maybe I cover the NBA, but I didn't even know. So it might take a while for them to overtake it, but I don't know about going heads up.
Look, they're not going heads up with the NFL. In all honesty, the NFL is king in America. We know this. Everybody knows this. But for basketball in the NBA is also it is a bigger global product. It's the second biggest sport in the world behind soccer, just for NBA purposes, because I think a lot of people pointing this out who are NBA reporters. The NBA isn't looking at the NFL ratings and going, we're going to compete with the NFL. They're just not. They are looking at the ratings and saying, how are we competing relative to ourselves? And Christmas Day was the most watched Christmas Day in 5 years. They nearly doubled their ratings year over year. And the Lakers-Warriors game was the most watched regular season game, period, not just Christmas, period, regular season game in 5 years. So those are good returns. That game, even though your team lost and has now lost 11 of their last 14, that was an awesome game. And this is what this is what I think LeBron was talking about. I don't think he was saying, hey, the NFL Christmas Day is we're bigger than the NFL. I think he's saying, look at the product that we just put out here. These games were super fun, even though you're giving a thumbs down on the Warriors. Your poor Warriors. That was a tough one to take on the chin.
At least we got like a Steph run at the end to kind of, harken back the old days of when it was fun, when we could get down 20 and it didn't matter, but you kind of know it's for naught now. So it actually wasn't that fun for me. But yeah, I hear you. I do hear you. I also think that there's probably, I don't even know off the top of my head, but say like these marquee games, Christmas Day is certainly one of them in terms of the whole slate that the NBA is looking to prop up things. If you lose that day to any degree, it's all about degrees. It used to be completely yours. I do think, let's just say you don't want 5 years from now for Christmas Day to be an NFL day. And I think that's what LeBron is saying is if they do end up competing on that day, and that's always been historic, that's like, sort of like an early season Super Bowl for the NBA. And if it diminishes to some degree, I don't think the NBA wants to do that. And so if they keep putting out a product like they did this time, it'll be fantastic. I largely think these ratings conversations are overrated. I don't think they're nothing. But yeah, I think by and large, people, we talked about this last week with Bill, but the competition for eyeballs is beyond sports now. It's very difficult to think you're going to in all these people into one event. The NFL largely is the only thing that succeeds at that because of the options people have to entertain at some point. So in terms of the way the NBA's rule changes, that's why I don't think that the uniformity in shooting threes is a nothing. I think it's somewhat overrated, but it's also something. The style of play, the end of game free throws, all these things that the NBA needs to look at to make people want to be engaged in the most engaging parts of a game, the ends of games, these types of things. We've seen baseball do it with pitch clocks, and I think we need to be evolving. We need to be cognizant of scheduling. I think all of these things are baked into the pie, and probably
they nailed it.
Go ahead.
They nailed it on Christmas. I mean, in terms of scheduling and they nailed it. It was a tremendous day of basketball, up to and including the Sixers somehow beating the Celtics in Boston. I still have no idea how that happened. That was quite enjoyable.
Flipping giving the bird with no finger. That was good.
Absolutely. That was excellent. All right, moving on here. We're going to do, as we do on Friday, a couple of Brad's bold predictions, and then we'll wrap up with Team of the Night. What do you got for us on Brad's bold predictions this week?
I keep going back to the Timberwolves, and I think that they're in trouble. And last week I said that Houston and Memphis are going to be in the top four. I do think Orlando is going to drop a bit, and the East is buoying them. The time frame on Franz and Paolo is going to be interesting because I do think Milwaukee's going to climb. I think Indiana is a team to watch. They're sort of quietly getting themselves together, and I think to some degree because of the Eastern Conference being so weak, I think a lot of us anyway have sort of penciled in. We've cut the line at 3, and then it's like who can get that top 4 seed, and I think we've all sort of said Orlando, and I don't think Orlando is going to stay up there, and I think they could actually end up flirting with the play-in line. So I don't know how bold that is, but even when I think there's an idea that when Banchero and Wagner get back that this and I don't think that's going to end up being the case.
I think once Banchero and Wagner come back, they'll be fine. They've been a really good team. The problem is they're so offensively challenged. Last night they lost to the Jimmy Butler-less Heat 89-88. Brad, that was the lowest score in the NBA this season. The previous lowest score in the NBA this season also featured the Orlando Magic. So like, this is something that producer Aaron brings up all the time. They're just like consistently an awful offensive team, but you do bring back, look, Franz was playing at an all-star caliber clip. He was fantastic. And Paolo also. So, I do like that team when those guys come back, but without them, man, they are hurting.
Well, they're hurting right now. I don't not like them. What I think is a lot of these assumed ideas we put into our head, and we forget the time that it takes for it to play out. And so I think Franz was fantastic when Banchero was out, and he became the main guy. And he went back to
he was awesome.
Franz. Yeah. And so I think when Banchero comes back, possibly them figuring out how to then get that Franz when Banchero was there and vice versa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a learning curve there to get at that level, because that's the level when they're a real team for both those guys individually. I sometimes think, and then they're coming back from injury. It's not going to be this instant thing. And if they continue to drop and they lose that ground while these guys are out, I don't think it's a situation where, oh my God, Banchero and Wagner are back and they just start skyrocketing. You factor in the learning curve. They're probably going to drop some more games while they're out. I think they end up battling for the play-in.
Also, no Mo Wagner because he's out for the.
That's big.
See, they have just been so injury bitten for them. But I'm a little bit more bullish on them than you. But we'll see what happens when those guys come back. All right, let's wrap it up with team of the night. We got some good ones from last night. There were some really good games. Depending on your perspective, I know which way you're going because the team on the other side was rough.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about Sacramento, and they're really interesting. They end up losing to Detroit, right?
Yeah. Detroit now has a better record than the Pistons have a better record than the Kings.
It's so disappointing because, when they traded for DeMar DeRozan, I likened it to the Rudy Gobert trade when Minnesota picked him up in terms of it was kind of tough to see the fit. They play up and down. He's a methodical guy, blah, blah, blah. I just liked it for the stability that it brought, the dependability that it brought. And I thought that because of he's durable, I thought it'd be somebody at the end of games. There were more things that made sense about it to me than a lot of people said. And it hasn't been able to prove for them. And Aaron's pointing out this is the third time we've had them as our team of the night, because to me, they're a really fascinating team. I mean, that team is fun to watch. When they get up and go, they are tough to stop. Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan, when Monk is going, Herter and Murray have had really down shooting seasons, and that quietly has been the biggest reason they can't compete from the 3-point line. They can't. They're losing that math game almost every night and by an appreciable margin. That's actually been the biggest problem. But this all comes down to, whatever the reason is they're losing, is De'Aaron Fox going to ask out? The rumors are already starting. He turned down a 3-year extension in the offseason. He can become a free agent in 26. This all becomes wildly fascinating because I can't imagine, other than, I don't know, SGA. There's very, very few players in terms of youth, what they still have left in the tank, star power, and what they bring to a team in terms of fit than De'Aaron Fox. And the San Antonio Spurs in the report were the team that was interested and monitoring that heavily.
Fantastic.
Oh my God. Fox and Wemby, forget about it.
That would be a lot of fun. I mean, their big problem is, they bring in DeMar DeRozan and it was expected that, now they'll be like a really good team in the clutch.
Right.
They haven't been, which is really surprising. In last night's game, they ended up losing to the Pistons. They led from the 155 mark of the first quarter until they ended up losing by a point. And that's just a brutal, brutal way. Like you bring in, it's supposed to be a Fox, DeMar DeRozan. We've got two closers. We're going to be awesome when games get tight. And it hasn't been that at all. Yeah. And now all of a sudden in a Western Conference that's absolutely loaded, they're outside of the play-in looking in. They're 3 games behind the Warriors, who are also free falling. They're 13 and 18. If you're De'Aaron Fox, to your question about does he ask out? He didn't sign that extension. If I'm looking around going, look, man, I would love to do it here. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do it here. And if I have a way to get to an ascendant San Antonio team and play with the future face of the league, who is going to be absolutely dominant for the next decade and a half, I'd rather play in San Antonio.
Well, and here's the key, John, is we were talking earlier about these threats of I'm going to leave in free agency and whether teams actually have the cap space to hold that over a team. And I believe I'm not a cap expert, but if you just look at their sheet, I think San Antonio can pretty easily get to the space they would need. Paul would be off. There's ways that when Fox did become a free agent after next season, if they wanted to play this thing out, and he would still be well within age range to pair with Wemby. So that's something that can really be helpful. It's like, dude, just wait a year. You can actually just go sign with Wemby, which we all know everything that the Spurs need to do to become almost an instant contender is to pair an elite point guard. I thought it would be Darius Garland before Cleveland blew out of the blocks. I thought Darius Garland would just be fantastic. I still think he will, but I don't think Cleveland will trade him now. But a guy like Fox, a guy like Garland, a young ascending star point guard, you put him with Wemby, forget about it. They're going to figure out a way to do that. Trae Young, I don't know, somebody. They're going to do that somehow. It's not going to be Castle. I don't think he's going to be the star point guard that they need to pair with him.
He's good though. I mean, it's so early. He's only 2 months into his career,
he's really good. But I don't think he's going to be, an SGA, a Fox even at point guard. I think they're looking for that guy, and I think Fox could be that guy as much as a year from now when they have the cap space anyway. So if the trade, that's something to watch with Sacramento.
De'Aaron Fox and Wemby, yes, and please. My team of the night, some other, I toyed with the Hawks who were down 17. They had an amazing comeback. They were down 17 with 6:30 left, and they outscored the Bulls 50-25 in the fourth quarter. The Bulls had 22 threes and still found a way to lose that game, which was ridiculous. And by the way, in that game, Trae Young ended up joining the 11,000 point club. I'm going to go with the Grizzlies here. You were talking earlier in the show about how everybody plays the same way. The Grizz are an exception to this. They put up a franchise record 155 points last night against the Raptors. They scored the most points in the NBA and somehow are doing it by just being middle of the pack in three-point shooting. They're 13th in three-pointers made and 13th in three-point attempts, which I thought was really great. But aside from all of that, here's the reason why I wanted to run this past you. Here's the reason why I'm making them my team of the night. On the Raptors broadcast last night, they were talking about Zach Edey. And the play-by-play guy was so excited about like the play that was unfolding that he mashed together Zach and Edey and called him Zeddy. And I think that needs to be his new nickname. I think the Big Zeddy would be a phenomenal name for him.
That's winner. Great call.
Let's call him the Big Zeddy. We're going to make the stick.
That's fantastic. I didn't hear that. The Big Zeddy.
Yeah. The Big Zeddy.
Say no more.
Say no more.
God, and I'm just gonna go. I dog Zeddy. That's what I'm calling him from now on. But I dogged Zeddy when he came out, and dude,
he looked really good last night. He's looked good when he's been out there. They're ramping up his minutes. I want you to take this and run with it. Put it on CBSSports.com. Just drop it into a rando column of yours and see what people think of it. Speaking of, what do you got cooking on CBSSports.com?
Well, you mentioned the Hawks, and I'm working on a piece right now on Trae. Really curious season for Trae Young because he's been fantastic as a facilitator, and I think outside of Jokic and maybe even with Jokic in the conversation in terms of the best passer in the world, I think that's been his best skill from day one. And I've long said his shooting has been overrated, and it's again proving true. He's a very, very inefficient 3-point shooter. He has cut down some on his early clock, late long bombs like he's Steph Curry. But he's still shooting 8-9 threes a game, probably somewhere around there. I think he's like a 32-33% guy. So it's really curious because of the way they've surrounded him with what makes sense on paper and what has made sense at times on the court with these defensive athletic wings with Daniels and Jalen Johnson, and DeAndre Hunter's having a fantastic season. Reese Shea, they draft him first. That's how you have to surround Trae Young. I think they're one elite rim protector from having a real formula with the switchable defensive wings, the high usage point guard that runs everything with the pick and roll, and a lob threat so that they can use that as leverage to spread out the shooters. It all makes sense on paper, and it's been a really awesome Trae Young season in a lot of ways, and yet his shooting numbers are just despicable. They're terrible.
Yeah, they are.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, if you tried to make an all-star case for Trae, it's like you have this part of him that's obvious. He's killing people as an assist guy. He's killing people in terms of just his overall effect on the offense. The Hawks have been a surprisingly competent team with maybe more upside than we thought. A lot of bullets on the side of the ledger of Trae Young having a great season. And then there's this other, he can't, like, literally can't shoot right now. Like, he's like Scoot. And so it's a very strange Trae Young season, and I'm going to kind of try to parse that out.
I'm excited for you to parse that out, given the choice between previous iterations of Trae Young, who was just jacking up shots, and the current iteration of Trae Young, who's been a really good facilitator, as you noted, and has helped like turn the Hawks into like a sneaky tough, sneaky fun watch, a sneaky tough team in the Eastern Conference, like a plucky team. They win that game again last night. There's no quitting that team. They did the same thing to the Lakers earlier in the season. I'll take this version of Trae Young all day, every day, over what we've seen before. He's actually being a good teammate.
And God, he's just so good. He's so, you have to be in today's game. I remember writing a couple years ago that Damian Lillard was fighting more for more than did he make sense for the Bucks to trade for him. He was fighting for an entire archetype of a point guard of, can you win out? If your name's not Steph Curry, can you win with a one-way offensive defensive liability point guard that is so good offensively, whether it be Luka, whether it be Damian Lillard, and Trae Young falls into that. Can you be so outstanding offensively that in today's game, as a huntable, a guy that you can go after in the playoffs, can you survive that? And Lillard was playing for that. He hasn't proven that you can be. The Bucks have not gotten better with Damian Lillard as an offensive upgrade from Jrue Holiday. In fact, they've gotten worse. And so Trae Young is, again, trying to fight that archetype. Let's say the Spurs were interested in him. Can you win when your best player is a one-way point guard and not named Stephen Curry? And so that's a very, very difficult hill to climb. Tyler Hero is going to try to climb it as good as he's playing offensively in Miami. He's a target defensively. He's somebody that you have to account for. And it's getting increasingly difficult to build around that kind of player. And so Trae Young is another reason he's very fascinating to me, is not just through the prism of the Hawks, but through the prism of the league as a whole, an entire archetype of player. Jalen Green, can you be so good offensively? And to do that, if you're going to be that good, he's as good as he's playing, he's got to shoot better.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty high bar that you're setting for, can you win, win capital W. I think I just look at what we've gotten from the Hawks over the past few seasons, and I was very much a keep DeJounte, get rid of Trae Young guy. And look,
I was
to the extent that they've just, as I said, they've been interesting in the Eastern Conference. They're in the mix. They're tough out and they're a fun watch. And I think like that's a win for the Atlanta Hawks. But make sure to check out Brad's piece as he works through what to make of Trae Young on CBSSports.com. He'll also be back next Friday. I'll be back on Monday with our NBA insider, Bill Ryder. We will be live on YouTube at noon Eastern. Come find us over there at Beyond the Arc CBS. But for now, for Brad Botkin, I am John Gonzalez. We thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and have a great weekend.